We've learned a lot already this Six Nations. For starters, Antoine Dupont is human. If Pascal Cazares is too, he shouldn't be treated like it. And Stuart Hogg is now a Lions captaincy contender. Who saw that coming? But the thing that surprised me most to learn this February has come from the very comment sections below and around these videos, because I never knew that I was willfully and gleefully so biased against Ireland. Up until now, I could never quite put together why it was that every time I looked at a photo of Liam Neeson, I threw up. Or if there was a reason that Sailor V by Bewitched brought me out in a rash. But it turns out I just really hate Ireland. Something I honestly never would have guessed without your guys' help, so thank you very much to the comment section. And so it now falls to me to dissect the most disgusting thing to ever happen in rugby, if not in life, as the island so dumb it gave us Bono finally got their shit together, and boy do they have a lot of it, causing the nation boasting my precious slack-jawed champion of champions, Paolo Garbisi, to have their worst game of the Franco Smith era so far. So how did the boys in Bath colour cruelly beat the Italian underdogs? Ireland's problem these first 2 rounds, other than being poo-poo willy heads, has been their inability to do anything with the ball. They won enough of it to dominate teams, but they struggled to break down anyone else. And Ireland's excellence at the line-out and breakdown remained the case. Here, Italy have lost their shape, so they look to play a quick phase with just one carrier and one man clearing out, so the other 13 can get into position. However, James Ryan plays this incredibly smartly. Instead of rolling the support out of the ruck or blasting them away from it, he folds the player over the ruck, making them ineffective. If there's a second Italian to clear out, this does nothing. But because the others are jogging back into position, it allows Cian Healy to slide in and win the penalty. Is this kind of nous that seems to give Ireland as much ball as they'd like? But this week they actually managed to do something with it, as they crossed the line 7 times for a total of 6 tries. However, it's the first scored here by the man with the world's most Dublin 4 face, Gary Ringrose, that perhaps best encapsulates the way Ireland were able to snap open the Italian defence. This year, the Italians have been genuinely very good across most of the field, but when they come within 10 metres of their own line, they become shite as this flag. I mean, what is this? It's just a bunch of colours. Just some colours. Like, at least this one has some cool shit on it, but like, where's your dragons, bro? Italy's defence is essentially a melding of 2 ideas. The forwards defend as individuals, whilst the backs defend as a collective. The backs slide and drift, whilst the forwards don't have any strict positioning in the way, say, Scotland under Steve Tandy always position 3 forwards next to the ruck, but let 2 others flow wider out. Instead, Italy are trusted to make their own decisions so long as they remain kind of in the 10-50 metres around the breakdown. This has been useful in helping Italy take care of some crash ball threats and stopping opposition generating momentum, but it also means they keep conceding the same 2 tries over and over again, and Ireland did the homework, coming up with plenty of ways to exploit both of Italy's big defensive issues. One happens when the backs simply disconnect. Garbisi's boys behind aren't too bothered about conceding ground so long as they don't give you the chance to bust completely to make a clean break, but every so often one player just steps out of line, turns their back or gets done for pace, and the whole thing falls apart. This is an experience and communication issue and can hopefully be resolved with time. The midfield that started against Ireland had only ever played together once before, which is not an excuse, but it is a factor. And so, without a natural familiarity, Ireland looked to just tear them apart. This begins with an ornate move to get the ball to Henshaw, who looks to barrel into as many backs as possible. Italy managed to pull everyone but God King Garbisi out, so Ringrose lines himself up between the 2 centres. He makes an okay carry. But the most important thing is who's making these tackles. Italy's backs defends the unit, but here the 3 component parts of their midfield are here, and here, totally apart and unable to communicate. Canna gets back up to his feet and jogs around to find Garbisi, so Joanna Lumley Sexire notices this and politely asks Canna if he fancies maybe tackling Cian Healy. This splits Italy's midfield up well and proper. Brex on the left, Garbisi on the right, and Canna on the floor in the middle. Sexwat then calls out the back and knows he only has to draw Brex to end all Italian cohesion. This allows Lama to reach out between Sprandio and Trula and offload to Connors, who jogs it in for a rather aesthetically pleasing try. It was the same idea on Hugo Keenan's try. Just Eat's delivery charge flashes to the blindside late and easily beats Brayley to give Lama a run down the wing. Garbisi makes the tackle, and from here Italy's backline is yet to reorganise. Brex reads the play, but the other players either side of him don't read him as he pins it in to take Ringrose. Sprandio tries to go with him, but he ends up in no man's land. Keenan picks a great line through the middle and does a big ol' rugby. And the final try by Keith Earls is an exception proving the rule. As Garbisi and Trula fly up together, united, they cut off every Irish option except for one super risky and really tricky flat ball. Except Jingoistic Sex Library is able to give that ball and Earls can cross in the corner. It's a calculated risk by Trula and Garbisi. Ireland will lose ground if they take anything but the riskiest option, but that riskiest option is a guaranteed try if and ultimately when they execute it. The other defensive problem is one Ireland just as easily exploited. Defending without a strict script in the forwards is effective until you reach the final few metres and every inch starts to count. So, Italy cram their forwards in tighter together once they get close to the line, but that's the only structural change. They still have a kind of free will, if you will. This meant all Ireland had to do was make them work. By hitting a defender a yard or two away from the ruck, it forced the Italians to scramble around each time, unsure if there'd be adequate cover on either side. The bonus point scored by CJ Stander is almost entirely down to this. Gibson Park takes it in off a scrum, and the backs clear out to give them quick ball, with the Italian pack taking far longer to get into position than their Irish counterpart, who proceed to crash and crash and crash. Ireland know they're working the same way each time, but Italy still have to defend on either side. Phase on phase, it's captain Luca Bigi working around to be the guard on the far side of the ruck. So, when Furlong carries here, BG does brilliantly, grabbing Furlong's ball-carrying arm so he can't stretch out to score, but the forwards defend as individuals with Italy, and they're used to the individual in the blue scrum cap with the kind of ginger beard being the guy on the fringe. So nobody thinks themselves to fold round and cover BG's space as the guard. Andrea Lavodi gets there eventually, but it's too little too late to stop Stander scoring. Tight carries near the line have an almost skittle-like effect on the Italian defence, forwards strewn everywhere around the ruck, unsure where to stand. This has cost them tries in every game so far in the Six Nations, but it's really fixable ahead of the game against Wales if they're willing to introduce some new protocol and ideas for close to the line, tearing up what they do over the other 85 metres of the pitch. And so, the Ringrose try, to go back to it, comes from a fusion of the two defensive problems. The first carry targets the backs, and James Lowe comes in to just rip Carlo Canna out the way. He pins him on the floor, does some general prickery to keep him out of the game for as long as possible, tear up that midfield. Meanwhile, tight carries act like a bowling ball into the Italian forwards. They're all grouping randomly, forcing 13 Brex to come in tight. As such, he's not in his channel where he'd be opposite Ringrose. Jimbo Bobble Sexwank holds his hands up as though he's going to catch it, and that just draws eyes long enough that Ringrose can drift between the two defenders either side of the channel to score. Ireland showed an ability to find and exploit opposition weaknesses that wasn't present against Wales or France. They were far more willing to take risks, knowing the rewards that might arise if they came off. So it'll be interesting to see if they stick to offloads and wide passes when England and Scotland rock up to play. Obviously, I really hope not, because I hate Ireland, but if you'd asked me a few weeks ago, I would have said there's encouraging signs here, and I'm glad to see it. Though a caveat does need to be made, because I think on Saturday we finally had it. The first performance of the Franco Smith era not dripping with positives for Italy. With the exception of the two passages where they scored their 10 points, for the first time since Smith took over, Italy were actually as bad as the scoreline suggests. It's especially annoying because they did start well. Similar to last week, Italy kick off long in the hope Ireland will kick back, then deploy a move more typically seen close to the try line when you want to manipulate a defence to make 5 yards rather than a clean break. It moves a penalty, and from the line out they play off the top of the cannon with Brex coming in on the crash ball between Ringrose and Lama. The idea being he sucks in both of those whilst Garbisi and Sporandio wrap round to create an overlap on the far side. However, Ringrose, who is a phenomenal defender, reads this and adjusts his footing to make it a one-on-one tackle, so Lama isn't involved. As such, Brex tries to adjust his line in turn, knowing what his role is in the move, but he does it too late and it costs him just the momentum in the tackle and allows Ringrose to stop him dead. Garbisi calls the previous plan off and shouts for a tight carry, which allows Italy to get some momentum after all. They keep playing tight, and eventually Ireland kill the ball, give away the penalty right before it goes out to Garbisi for the first time. An interesting note here, right? Garbisi is up there with the George Fords of the world in terms of his ability to anticipate what a defence will look like in 2 or 3 phases' time, and as such, we've seen him look frustrated at the Six Nations when other Italians are celebrating penalties, because he figured they could create a try inside a few phases. But here, he applauds the penalty. It was obvious to Garbisi Italy weren't going to create anything, and so Ireland just gave them 3 points in exchange for minimal, almost no pressure. There was no real threat here. Garbisi is also the sole creator of Italy's only try. The maul loses momentum, so Garbisi calls for the forwards to pull out before the thing collapses, pointing where he wants them positioned. The whole time, he's glancing around to this blindside, expecting it'll open up any second, and sure enough, it does after 2 phases. The maul drew in all 8 Irish forwards, and 2 phases happening so quickly means the forwards are only approximating their positioning, and they're not quite exactly where they'd want to be. This leaves Tighes, Furlong and Byrne the wrong way round, with Furlong having to cover too much space for a front rower. Saxophone is rushing up to shut down the slight overlap, but Furlong doesn't have the kind of pace to keep up. But instead of going for the gap this opens, Garbisi thinks about the bigger picture. He targets both Tighes, taking them both out of the game, meaning the only Irish defenders in play have rushed beyond the ball. They're not making this tackle. He frees both arms, allowing Trula and Meyer to flood in on his shoulder, Meyer taking a great offload. Lama then makes the tackle kind of reminiscent of the animal he almost shares a name with, allowing Italy to finish. One more note on Prince Paolo while we're here, as he gave us round 3's pointless Italian innovation of the week. Normally, teams have a winger chase a little dink box kick, but instead Italy used Garbisi. The defence is less likely to spot this is out of the ordinary and suspect something tricky if the 10 runs in flat, so he's able to regather, and then Canna is able to slot in a 10 very neatly and naturally. Except, frustratingly, his follow-up kick is rather meh and easily covered by James Lowe. Italy's problem is no longer creating try-scoring chances or even taking them. It's regaining momentum when things start to go against them. Just as this kick out on the full at Twickenham killed Italy's momentum and they never managed to regain it, a strong first 4 minutes crumbled into their worst performance under Franco Smith last Saturday on a tiny moment. This week, it was a silly offside by BG immediately after their opening penalty, and it allowed Jubilee Sex Bubble to slot 3 points, making their previous good work redundant. This is so much worse because it's a penalty Italy pointed out themselves. Many players might have got away with this, but this is part of Italy's pointless innovation kick. They frequently exploit a loophole in the laws where forwards can wait offside whilst a winger, onside, sprints because once he overtakes them, they're now put onside. BG is pointing at the winger and it just draws attention to him. So the ref notices and hands Ireland a dumb penalty that sets the tone for the rest of the game. Italy's discipline was frankly atrocious. It was really bad and consistently ruined good opportunities. And their kicking game is still poor. They're often simply thumping the ball back to the other team. There's no real strategy to how they kick, only when, and Ireland found it very easy to exploit. Italy were bad in Rome, but let's also remember they currently have the worst injury problems of any of the 6 nations, with 10 of their best 15 unavailable for that game, the excellent Stephen Varney pulling out right before kickoff. Varney's trademark is this, picking up the ball to draw a forward into his eye line so he can then flick the ball to a carrier the same guy would be dealing with, giving Italy a superior carry. But look what happened when replacement Brayley tried to achieve this. Brayley is looking at the guy he's passing to the whole time. It's a subtle change of body language, but it makes a world of difference in allowing a defender to know who he's tackling and when. Brayley's a good player, but he's a nuts and bolts 9, not in the dynamo mould of Varney, and Italy felt that loss at the weekend. They now remain in Rome another weekend to play inexplicably Grand Slam chasing Wales, a game they likely targeted pre-tournament as winnable after how they pushed them in the autumn, whilst the Bogey Boys play Scotland, hoping to put their 6 nations back on track for taking on an English team I've also discovered I'm horrendously biased towards apparently. There's 7 games left to go this tournament and an awful lot more left to learn. Thank you for watching that. I do appreciate it, and I want to make it very clear that I do really appreciate and take on board negative feedback. The whole island thing was meant as a joke and reaction, and I hope that isn't seen and conveyed as me not taking that on board, and not, even if I don't necessarily feel like I'm biased against Ireland, I recognise that if it comes across as though I am, that's something I need to work on and something I need to look into, and so I will continue to do that going forward. So I appreciate that. Thank you. And anything else along those lines. Thank you as well for watching. If you fancy the sports channel on Patreon, for anyone that does, there is a preview of the final round going up very soon for you guys as an exclusive thing in the style of the podcast, and there's a new episode of that on the final game of the pool stage, so there's plenty more going on. There'll be more on the channel next week after the penultimate round of games. Rugby, and indeed rugby.